after making this statement that our destination is not nirvana, it is not enlightenment, nor God realization. Our destination is an absence of illusion. And through the stories, you could say that we're exploring the nature of illusion. So there are several old stories which, when we put them together, allow a question to be asked. It's a poser for us. The first is that old story about a time when a young seeker had heard about Mullah Nasruddin and how he was a noted mystic. And so this seeker, after truth and enlightenment, sought out Mullah Nasruddin, and when he approached, he found Mullah Nasruddin sitting under a tree. And as he observed, he saw Mullah Nasruddin put out his hand and a plate of sweetmeats arrive in his hand. Of course, the young man was quite aghast, but then Mullah Nasruddin put out his hand and a little goblet of sherbet appeared in his hand also. So the young being was totally mesmerized and approached Mullah Nasruddin quite excited and saying, Mullah, will you please, I want to learn how you do that. Oh, said the Mullah, then you have to pass a test. Oh, said the young man, what is the test? And the Mullah said, well, would you like the easy question or the hard question? So the young man said, well, you know, I've been a seeker, I've learned quite a lot of things. I'll take the hard question. So Mullah Nasruddin said, how do you make a hole in your garden fence big enough for your chickens to go and peck in your neighbor's yard, but not big enough for his chickens to come and peck in your yard? The young man just scratched his head, quite perplexed about this, and not having the answer to it, he wandered away thinking that he'd failed. But Mullah Nasruddin chuckled to himself and he said, yes, yeah, there's a young man who's on his way. And there's that serious story about that very great physician and philosopher and alchemist. He was also called Maimonides, or we know him familiarly as Hermes. And he was very much revered and honored by a certain caliph in Cordoba who sought his wisdom on many occasions. But there were those who were very jealous of the relationship that Maimonides had with the caliph, and one vizier in particular had taken a great dislike to Maimonides and was intent on bringing him down. So this vizier devised a ploy. He went to the caliph and he said, I have to tell you that Maimonides whispered to me that he finds your breath most offensive. Well, the caliph was surprised because he really did hold Maimonides in great reverence, but then he had to get to the bottom of the matter, and so he called Maimonides to him. But in the meantime, the vizier had gone to Maimonides and said, I have to tell you that the caliph confided in me that he finds your breath very offensive. So, of course, having the call from the caliph, Maimonides had to go in his presence, And in order not to offend the Caliph, he took a handkerchief and covered his face with it before he presented himself. But as soon as the Caliph saw him with this handkerchief over his face, he thought, well, this vizier must be right, that Maimonides finds my breath offensive and he has to wear a handkerchief to protect himself from breathing in. And so the Caliph was very, very angry, and of course, as Caliphs are, he wanted to take revenge on Maimonides. So when he was out and about, he went down to where the lime kilns were kept, the great furnaces that made the enamel objects and so forth, the earthenware objects that were used in the palace. So he went up to those who kept the furnaces going, and he said to them, when someone comes to you and says to you, have you fulfilled the Caliph's orders? Throw him into the lime kilns. And then, of course, he called Maimonides to him and sent him on an errand to go to the lime kilns and say to those who took care of them, have you fulfilled the Caliph's? And of course that would take care of Maimonides. But as it happened, when Maimonides was on his way to fulfill his Caliph's orders, it happened that an old woman on the road stopped him and said, please, I know you're a very, very great physician. My daughter is suffering. Will you please, please, please come and help her? So Maimonides, being the being that he was, he answered this call and he went with the woman to take care of the daughter. And so after that he went to the lime kilns and he said to those in attendance, have you fulfilled the Caliph's orders? And they said, yes. And so Maimonides went back to the Caliph, and to the Caliph's great surprise, there was Maimonides. He was expecting him to be gone and dead. So he wanted to explain what happened, so he went to the lime kilns and he asked those in attendance, well, did you take care of my orders? And they said, yes, we did. And here's the ring of the person who asked the question. But as soon as the Caliph saw the ring, he recognized it as that of the vizier. And when he went back and the explanation was made between Maimonides and the Caliph, it became very clear, because each had been told about the offensive breath. So the Caliph learned a very great lesson from this. Now, in our minds we can maybe conjure up what it was that those lessons were, but there's a final little story just to bring our trilogy together, and that is a story about a merchant who was with a spiritual master for many, many years, and in the teachings of the spiritual master it was that one should never be involved in shams or pretense. One should always be authentic and real. But one day the merchant came to his spiritual master and advised that he had to go on a long journey to a far distant place to do some trading, so the master wished him well and the merchant went on his way. But when he was away in this far distant place, he was invited to a great reception of nobility and other merchants who were high-flown in the area around there. But when our merchant entered the reception hall, to his very great surprise, there was his master. Dreadlocks, beads around his neck and amulets around his waist, attended by a group of the nobles and the merchants who hung on his every word. And the merchant was very greatly surprised. And so when the crowd dispersed a little bit, he went over to his spiritual master and he said, what are you doing? What is the meaning of this? And his spiritual master answered him. And so the question that's posed to us out of these three little stories is, what did the spiritual master reply to the merchant? What is the meaning of this? Why this sham? Why this pretense? Why this? What say you? In seeking to explore the nature of illusion, what was the reply that the spiritual master gave to the merchant? Why are you doing this? And again, to answer this, we have to dive deep into our cauldron, into our mandala, where all the sacred symbols, archetypes and characters reside. Why? What was the answer that the spiritual master gave to the merchant? Why are you doing this? The nature of illusion.